Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Daily Racing Form YouTube. I'm Gino Buccola alongside David Aragona. I'm here in New York in the DRF studios. I got a chance to hang out with David a little bit yesterday. David, we were pretty excited about our Pick 5 strategy video that we put together last week. Seemed like we had a lot of good feedback, and we would love to hear from all of you out there because we're going to try to do more unique videos that are kind of tailored to wagering strategy, David. So what were some of your thoughts about last week's first attempt at this video for you and I, and then moving into this week?
Yeah, I'm happy that the viewers out there appreciated us having more of a wagering-focused conversation. And if you have any further comments or ideas about how we should refine this or topics that you want us to cover in this video series in the future, feel free to drop a comment and we'll definitely take it into consideration. But we just want to get the viewers and bettors out there thinking more about how to prioritize value in constructing their multi-race tickets.
Yeah, we're going to hopefully have some different layered content on the YouTube channel from now on. We'll have some stuff that's more educational for some of the newer handicappers and gamblers. And then we'll have stuff like this that might be a little bit more for the serious bettors who maybe want to raise their level, their game to the next level, or maybe want to kind of get some help with wagering strategy, because that's a big part of this game, David. And we have a huge weekend coming up. We're going to be focusing on Gulfstream Park. Normally we would have probably 5 or 6 different videos of all the stakes previews from Gulfstream, but we can take a look at the late pick 5 that will be centered around the Fountain of Youth, which is going to have Kentucky Derby points on the line. And we'll do the same sort of thing we did last week. We're going to have our particular horses into 3 categories. They're going to be horses that we're keying in on. They're going to be horses that we're using. They're going to be horses that we might defend with and use in some way, shape, or form, but horses that were not necessarily like our A top tier horses. So David, anything else you want to hit on before we head out to Florida for Gulfstream Park?
Yeah, as I said last week, this whole strategy that we're putting forth is kind of based on the Steve Christ ABC method, where our key horses are the A horses, the ones that we really want to get home in as many legs as possible, whereas on the other end of the spectrum, the defend horses are horses that we're hoping win no more than 1 race in the sequence, and that we can be right in the other legs with the horses that we're going to key on.
So we'll be looking at Gulfstream Park for March the 1st. It's Fountain of Youth Day, Saturday, March the 1st. And we'll take a look at races 10 through 14, that late pick 5 sequence. And David, that's going to start with race number 10, the grade 3, the very one. In this field, I think from a starting point, we can talk about the One Forever After All, because she was a horse who had been knocking on the door over and over and over again with runner-up efforts. And then she kind of put it all together for a win in the La Provoyante, which is a similar race to this, conditions, age group, everything. So she defeated La Mahana and some other rivals from that race. She's kind of a starting point, but for a horse who had been a runner-up over and over and over, finally put it all together, are you going to want to take a short price on her to string victories together now? Because she'll probably be one of the shorter prices in here.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point. How much do you trust her to win 2 races back-to-back when she had racked up so many minor awards prior to that and was a horse that was struggling to find the winner's circle? So I agree with you. Just based on the last race, the La Prevoyante, which is kind of the key race to hone in on when you're handicapping this, the very one, she's very logical here because she got the job done. It was a narrow margin of victory, but she ran well. So she's a horse that I'm putting in the use category if we want to throw up my grid for this race 10 that's kicks off this sequence. She, for me, is a use. I don't think that she's going to offer any particular value in this race, but I think based on her recent form, she's definitely one of the more likely winners. I'm putting the number 8, La Mahana, in the same category. All in all, she got a pretty similar trip to Forever After All last time, a little more forwardly placed early, had to come through along the inside, trying to find her way to pick through traffic, whereas Forever All came down the outside of the course, but they both kind of hit the wire together in the same race, and I think they're both very logical. I wanted to key in on a different horse, though, for the one that I'm hoping to get home in this race. That's the number 4, Immensitude, is coming out of a different race. She last participated in the Long Island back in November at Aqueduct, and I thought ran pretty well in that spot. She was drawn in a really tough post position, 11 out of 11, and her jockey, Junior Alvarado, actually did a pretty good job to get her into the 2 to 3 path for most of her trip from there, but she had to wait in traffic a little bit, was finishing well at the end when she finally got clear in the stretch, and I also thought she ran pretty well too back against La Mahana in a race where that one caught her from behind. And she just feels like a horse that has the tactical speed to be forward in a race where there isn't a whole lot of pace.
David, I have The 1 and the 8 who you have as your use horses, I put them in my defend spot because I do think they're kind of like the measuring stick horses in the field. I don't know how much value you may get from them, but they're horses where if my key horses in other race wins, I'll be fine if they win and they have helped me hit this pick 5 ticket. I think we may be able to find more value though elsewhere. You mentioned the 4. I have the 4 in my use category as well. I agree with everything you were saying about Immensitude. And I kind of feel the same way about Blush that I do with Immensitude. I feel like there's a little bit more upside there than we've seen, but horses that are coming off a couple months, I think they're higher upside and they could offer a little bit of value in here. So both of those horses are in my use section. For me, the keys to this race, I don't think there's that much early speed in here. I could really see what Love looks like getting a nice trip. That was the horse who was 4th in the La Prevoyant last time out, was behind Forever After All, saved ground down on the inside. I wouldn't be shocked if this horse were to get the lead cutting back and could be a little fit second start off the bench. So I'm going to throw what Love looks like second start off the break. I think Beach Bomb has a very high ceiling. It seems like these connections were very kind of ambitious where they placed this horse a couple times. She ran in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf last time out. She was just overmatched against that group. I think this is a much better spot for her. And if you're just like using her speed figures in her last couple races, they stack up very well with this group. So I'm going to use the 5, 6 as my top tier. They're in my keys. For my uses, I have the 4 and 9. And then for my defends, I'm going to use the 1 and the 8, the logicals that I think might be a little undervalued in this race. So that's kind of how I've set it up, David. Anything else you want to hit on in race number 10?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see how we slot these horses into different categories based on our opinion. Sometimes we might look at something the same way, and it's a use for you, it's a defend for me. I put the numbers 2 and 6 as defend horses, given the fact that we don't see a whole lot of pace in this race, and they could be forward. But I think we're ready to move on to a race that might not merit as much discussion.
Yeah, as we get to the Gulfstream Park Mile, these are races, David, where I would love to always take shots against a heavy favorite if possible. And I know you, and doing enough of these videos with you over the last couple of years, you're the same way. If we can try to poke holes in a big favorite, we will do so. If Mindframe comes back anything close to what he was last year, and if he's able to be the type of older horse I think he will be this year, this is a great starting spot for him where it just doesn't feel like any of these horses can class up to him. Honestly, he could show up to me, I think, with like a B- type effort and still probably get the job done in here. So not necessarily exciting from a value-based standpoint, but do you think Mindframe is also like that big of a standout on paper?
Yeah, as you were hinting at, typically I like to find a reason to be against these horses because they're so obvious. They're going to be the keys to so many players' pick 5 sequences, but I don't want to manufacture some anti-mind frame opinion that I don't actually have when I handicap this race. And he's just a really talented horse. And it's kind of easy to forget because we saw him so briefly last year, but I mean, he was right at the top of that 3-year-old male division. And if not for Dornoch, he'd be coming into this race undefeated, having finished second to that foe in the Belmont and the Haskell, but he's got good tactical speed, so I'm not too worried about him drawing the rail in here. Obviously, that's not the ideal post position for a horse like this coming off the layoff, but he probably has the talent to overcome it. And as we throw up the grid for this race, Gino, I will use 1 defend because I don't like to go just all in on a horse coming off a layoff. It's going to be such a short price, but most of my play here, I feel confident going through Mindframe. And the 1 defend that I'll throw in there is the number 7 Steel Sunshine, who's just a really reliable late runner going this 1-turn mile. That's his specialist distance. And he's been in relatively good form recently. And he's just the kind of the one other horse in this race for me that really belongs at this grade 3 level because there's a lot of filler in here. And personally, I couldn't get interested in the number 3 Encino, who might be the other horse for some people.
And I completely agree with your defend horse, David. I think if you're playing this race and you're trying to beat Mindframe, you're probably expecting that he gets involved maybe in the early pace somehow. Maybe he gets kind of a bad trip down on the inside. And it's a horse like that who can come from behind and who can pick up the pieces. And just like you said, that's the game for Steel Sunshine, going the mile at Gulfstream Park. That's where he's at his absolute best. Yeah, you probably won't see this all too often from me, but I really do think this is probably going to be one of the better older horses this year. I do. So if that's the case, he should get the job done in this race, and he should be able to handle a field just like this as a starting point. So not too creative here, but I will get creative in some of the other races as I tried to do in race number 10. Any final thoughts on the Gulfstream Park Mile?
No, Mindframe just feels like a very likely winner and not a key horse that's offering a ton of value. But as we said, sometimes it's just about advancing to the next leg and keeping your ticket alive.
Yeah, and then strategy, right? So if you know you're going to be singled into a really short price in a couple of the other races, you're going to have to try to get value there. You're going to have to chuck some of those A, B morning line favorites out and use some of the longer prices. So as we move to the Honey Fox, race number 12 at Gulfstream Park, we have fillies and mares, 4-year-olds and up, going a mile on the turf course. David, why don't you start us off here? Would you kind of see the overview of this race, and who are some of the horses that you have in the mix?
Yeah, there are a couple turf races in the latter portion of this sequence where I think you can compensate for maybe singling Mindframe or using Mindframe as a key horse, because there are runners in these fields that are competitive that might get dismissed at decent prices. And I'm not exactly sure how they're going to bet this race. I haven't yet seen the morning line for the Honey Fox, but I wanted to key in on a couple of horses that I was hoping wouldn't be favorites in here. One of those is the number 1, Tax Implications, who is a horse that has settled for minor awards a number of times for the Chad Brown stable. So maybe not the most reliable winning type, but I did think she ran really well last time in the Matriarch against a better field than this. She was far back early, made a big late run up the inside. And I just think this filly is at her best going a flat mile distance in a race where there's going to be pace. So I figured that she would be one that might be charging late and could get a big piece of this at a decent price. And then the other horse that I wanted to key on is the number 4, Poolside with Slim. She's got good tactical speed, and I thought she was competing in a pretty tough edition of the Mrs. Revere last time. She had a difficult outside post position that day, was a little rank when her jockey John Velasquez tried to rate her into the clubhouse turn, but ultimately did stay on to just miss second behind Pounce in that spot. So they're the 2 horses that I can see getting the right kind of trips in this race, and I'm hoping that they are fair prices. They're my 2 keys, but this is the kind of race where I do want to have some backup coverage, because I could see a lot of different scenarios playing out.
Yeah, I'll be spreading out in this race also. I found this race very challenging, and I just think you can make a case for many horses in this race. And when that's the case, when I can, build reasoning for a lot of different horses, I definitely want to use some value horses. So a horse that's going to be in the mix for me for sure is the 11, Ready for Shrill, who's a little bit light on speed figures, but I think second start back off the break, this is a horse who may be able to get back towards some of the precocity this horse showed early on in the career, where she was very good in her first couple starts. That Keeneland debut win was something that I thought she was going to be able to build off. And I would say she was a little disappointing in a couple of her last starts last year. So I do think that there's a ceiling that may not be in the speed figures quite yet for Ready for Shrill. She's definitely going to be in the mix for me. Horses like the 9 Pounce, David, you and I have done videos a few times. I'm a fan of this one, and I really do think she will enjoy the cut back to a mile. Getting to a mile and a 16th, mile and an 8th, that's just a little bit too far for her. Now cutting back to this mile, she'll put herself in a nice striking spot. I think she'll have every opportunity. The 2 See You Around is super logical. I don't really have to kind of sell too many people on that one. So this will be one of those races where I need a lot, because I'm using, those are my key horses, 2, 9, and 11. And then it depends. I have the 1, Tax Implications, who you had as a key. I have, Ozara, who I think could step forward and start off of a long layoff. This one was very good early on at 3, and then had a 10-month break and came back as a winner. You look at Pounce, who I had mentioned, also in our time is going to be in the mix. So David, I'm using a bunch in here. I will have a couple keys that I'm going to try to really shorten up throughout this pick 5 sequence. But this to me was one of the more challenging races, and I'm definitely going to have at least a few big prices in the mix.
Yeah, for me, Pounce was the horse that was kind of right on the cusp between being a key horse and a use horse for me, because I'm not exactly sure what kind of value she's going to offer. And I was left a little cold by her last performance, but I definitely think she's in the mix and in our time, a very logical contender. I just wasn't sure the value was going to be there after her form was so exposed last time in the Pegasus World Cup Filly Mare Turf.
There was a look at the Honey Fox and some of our thoughts on how we may be approaching pick 5 wagers. We will now flip the page to the Fountain of Youth, which they're going to have as race number 13. And then the Mac Diarmida will close things out as race number 14. Kentucky Derby points are on the line, and we have Burnham Square, who was the grade 3 Holy Bull winner, one of the local preps at Gulfstream Park, the last round of preps. He was very good in that race. David, you have Sovereignty, who was the grade 3 Street Sense winner last year. So he has a win at Churchill Downs, and a horse who was really moving forward towards the end of the 2-year-old season, but we have not seen him race since the end of October. Then you have River Thames, who's been very, very good for Todd Pletcher in both starts, 2 for 2 and undefeated. Those are probably the 3 top tier of betting choices in this Fountain of Youth. Who do you like in here? How do you want to play this thing? Who do you want to start with?
Yeah, I think the big 3 are likely to attract most of the support in here, but I kind of wanted to try to narrow it down to just keying on Burnham Square, who might ultimately go favorite in here. We'll see how the bettors assess this race, but I just really like the way that this 3-year-old is progressing from start to start, and I'm not sure that this race came up so much tougher than the Holy Bull Field that he beat last time, and I liked everything that he did in that race, the way he took kickback, ran through horses on the turn, and finished it off at the end. He's proven going this mile in the 16th distance at Gulfstream. I just feel like he's a very reliable option in this race, whereas all of the others have questions to answer, and maybe that's going to knock down his price a little bit, but I don't think he's going to be some kind of odds-on favorite in this race, and I do believe he is more likely to win than the other major contenders. The one horse that I think could present a little bit of value, I don't think he's nearly as likely to win as Burnham Square, so that's why I've got him in the use category instead. I just like Burnham Square as a win option more, but the number 8, Keep It Easy, is the one other horse that I would kind of throw into the mix for discussion, because he was pretty impressive at a couple of sprint victories last year, and he's got nothing but pedigree to stretch out in distance. And Dale Romans does pretty well with stretch outs in this situation with non-maidens, if you look at some stats in Formulator. So he's the horse that I would want to throw into my use category, and maybe even think about upgrading to a key if my budget allows for it.
And we had pretty similar thoughts on this race, David. I'm going to have one key who was a horse that was in your use. And to me, I think the horse to beat is no doubt Burnham Square. So like Burnham Square is going to be in all of my tickets as a use. I'm also going to use the 1 Gate to Wire, who got a really good setup in the first start on the dirt. So maybe there's some upside for Gate to Wire. But for me, I think this could be the race where we just get a really good effort from River Thames. Kind of a horse who needs the points, who could sit a very nice trip, who might be able to get the jump on a horse like Burnham Square and Sovereignty, who I don't know if either of them are as tactical as River Thames. And that's kind of my deciding factor with those two, is that I think this is a horse who could make his own trip, who might be a little bit more cranked up for Saturday to try to get the points that they need on Saturday. You know, Sovereignty, I think would be pretty content with a good second or third coming back to the races and then using that as a stepping stone. Burnham Square has a good amount of points right now. Not that they're not trying to win this race or anything, but I'm looking for a horse who maybe needs this race, who could get the jump on those. So I'm going to put River Thames as my key horse. I'll probably have 1 or 2 different tickets where I'm singled to this one. And then I will have all over the place. Burnham Square, definitely the horse to beat. Maybe we can get a little value with Gate to Wire there. I also thought like and maybe interesting horse on the way outskirts was Neo Equus, who probably gets the lead in here, David. And if we look back, and Rated by Merit is a really nice horse and maybe better than we are thinking right now, because Rated by Merit's kind of out of sight, out of mind. Maybe the 7 horse just ran into a very challenging foe a couple times and could kind of be at least a bottom of exotics horse. Or if you're really spreading out in this race, maybe you're someone who singled Mind Frame and you're looking for prices in other spots. That would be one I'd be okay, because I think you'll get a pretty good run for your money with Irad giving them a nice aggressive ride. So the 6, the horse for me. Then I think Burnham Square, the one to beat, maybe a little bit of value with Gate to Wire. And if you want to go really deep, I would throw in the 7, who could give you a little brief run for your money with some speed there. So Key, any final thoughts on the Fountain of Youth?
Interesting to see how this one plays out for the Kentucky Derby Trail, but I didn't see a whole lot of wagering value to be extracted from this race personally.
Yeah, I think we're probably looking at the second and third choices, or the first and third. Like, they're not going to be separated by all that much. So that might be a race where you want to use your opinion, and like we've done, shorten up. I definitely wouldn't want to use the big 3, all 3 of them, because I think then you're really diluting some of your payouts. Like, take a little bit of a stand with 1 or 2 of them that you like more than the others, and maybe use a price or 2. I'd be fine with that. I just wouldn't want to use all of those shorter prices, that we could see here in the Fountain of Youth. So let's hopefully get to our closing leg. The Mac D Ermita will go 1 mile and 3/8 on the turf course in race number 14, David. A couple horses that I thought might be on like a top tier here. You have Miss the Cut, who comes back after taking a shot at Royal Ascot. Some of the races that he was running last year before he left were very good. I think if you look at some of Grand Sonata's form, he's been facing pretty tough company. You have a horse like Sugoi, who's been in good form, probably stepping up and facing a little bit tougher in here. And even Dashman won the McKnight last time out off a couple month break. Those are probably some of the horses who will take some support in here. What's your opinion like in race 14? Do you have a strong opinion? How are you going to approach your keys, uses, and defends?
I feel like I've been pretty logical up until this point. I probably used some 4 or 5 to 1 shots in there in my key column, but this is a race where I want to take some bigger swings. The one logical horse that I have as a key is one of the horses you mentioned, the number 9 Grand Sonata, who figures to be among the favorites in this race. He's kind of, for me, the reliable option among the shorter prices because he's proven at this distance and has been in relatively good form recently. But the 2 bigger prices that I would love to get in there as a winner for my key to end this sequence is the number 1 Anglophile. Gino, you know, I've got a little bit of a love affair with this horse. I'm trying to get him home for a while, but I just have not liked a bunch of the rides that he's gotten recently. He ends up wide and just not in the right kind of position. This time, he's drawn the rail with Joel Rosario, a jockey that loves to save ground in turf races. I feel like there's finally going to be a better trip coming for Anglophile, and this is going to be a race where probably a lot of people jump off the bandwagon, so he could be a fair price. And then the other horse that's going to be a bomb in this race is the number 10 Parchment Party, whose one turf race doesn't look like a whole lot to write home about when you see it on form. When you look up the replay for that race, he had a tough trip that is not noted in the running chart comments. He was steadied 2 times around the far turn, was just ridden very conservatively through the stretch, appeared to really be handling the turf that day, but just was not really ridden aggressively to get into the race at any point. And he has nothing but pedigree to go much longer on the bottom side. So I like that Bill Mott is finally trying a marathon race with him. I'm just fine with him doing it on the turf. So at a big price, he's a horse that I would love to get in there. But as you can see, this is a race where I think that a lot of different scenarios can play out. So I do want to have some coverage.
I completely agree with your thoughts on Grand Sonata. I think he's the horse to beat when you look at the form overall, who he's been facing recently. So the Fort Lauderdale is a good race to kind of get a gauge where that group was just a little too tough for him. He ran a pretty good race there, and then he stepped up in the Pegasus and faced a lot tougher, and he ran basically the same sort of speed figure that he ran in the Fort Lauderdale. He was just facing a little bit tougher group. This is a much more logical spot for him now, where he's not really facing any of the top horses in the division or any of the type of class that he was facing in even the last couple races. I think it's a really good spot for Grand Sonata. So he's going to be the key for me. Then others that I want in the mix, Miss the Cut. We know that the DeVoe barn can get horses ready to fire off of a layoff, but I am just a little concerned always when horses make traveling trips like this where they go out of the country and come back. So while I do respect Miss the Cut, and if he were to show back up with the type of efforts that he had in the San Marcos and the San Luis Rey and the Elkhorn, those are all really good. And they would probably put him right on the wire and probably pretty close to the winner's circle in a race just like that. The one who maybe we can get a little value on, I'm curious to see what the price ends up being on the 8 Sugoi here for Maker. Dettori is going to be aboard. This is a horse who can sit close throughout. When you look at the last 6 or 7 races, they're all pretty solid, pretty consistent overall form. There's 1 or 2 races where he may have just been facing a little tougher company and was probably in a bit over his head. And other than that, everything really seems to make sense. What I also like, he has kind of a nice tactical speed running style where he can show some speed, but he can sit close. I think Dettori is going to try to put him forward in this race and have him involved throughout. So I'm going to key on Grand Sonata. That'll give me an opportunity earlier on to spread out a little bit and kind of build one ticket where I'm leaning everything on Grand Sonata. Then I can go the other way and play other tickets, David, where I'm including Miss the Cut, I'm including Sugoi. And because he's your buddy, and if he wins, I want to make sure I get something out of it too. I think I may have to throw Anglophile in my defend case just because. So, David, final thoughts here on the 14th.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said about Miss the Cut. It feels like the cat's out of the bag with some of these Cherie DeVoe trainer changes, and the horses tend to take a lot of money. So he does have competitive form. I just didn't see him as potentially offering value in this race. And the same goes for the top 2 finishers in the McKnight that a lot of these horses are coming out of, Dashman and Cash Equity. Their form is kind of exposed now, and they might not be the prices that they were last time. So I put them in the used category.
Yeah, that was one thing you could take from both of us. We're both a little cold on that race in particular, and some of the horses coming out of there. So, and one more point, as you were mentioning Cherie DeVaux, I think Marcus Hirsch had a really good article right now at drf.com talking about her recent success, how great she's been doing over at the fairgrounds, in particular with young horses and maiden special weight races. So if you want to find out more information about that, you can check out that really good article from Marcus Hirsch on drf.com. So should we take a little recap look at how we've put together the grids, David? Why don't you start us out in race number 10?
Yeah, so I'm trying to keep my key column pretty thin through the first 4 legs and then maybe catch a price at the end, which is the race we just talked about. Anglophile or Parchment Party would really make my day if I could be right heading into that final leg. But I'm hoping to get things off started on the right foot with the number 4, Immensitude, in a race that I found tough to make decisions. The very one, hopefully Immensitude, is the horse that I felt like I could upgrade and maybe set me up to do well later in the sequence. I'm not getting too creative in the 2 dirt races. Frame, we talked about him being probably a universal single for a lot of people. It kind of turns it into a bit of a pick 4 sequence, or maybe you're trying to get some value in 2 of the turf races, race 12 and 14 instead, because for me, Burnham Square and Mindframe likely to be favorites, but I also thought they were very much the most likely winners of those 2 races.
So there's a look at how David's going to be approaching the pick 5. What's nice about when we put the grids together like this, however your bankroll is, everybody's different, right? I know people that are playing $24 tickets, others that are playing $240, others that are playing $1,000 tickets sometimes, right? These are tailored so you can know how we like horses in what order if you need a little bit of help. But I would encourage every one of you out there to do something similar to this. Even if you're not mapping it out like we have with Keys, Uses, Defends, make sure you know your preference order, map yourself out a couple different tickets, figure out what you like the best. Because if you're not taking some time, like David and I just did, we took about 30 minutes here to go through our strategy. Now, when I get ready to put my ticket in, David, I just feel better about it after the process of talking it out with you, stacking them up in tiers. I know the horses that I like most. I'm going to build a lot of stuff around Mindframe. Then I can play a couple different tickets where I build things around the horses I like in the 13th and the 14th. I can play one ticket where I have like Mindframe and River Thames singled, and then use basically all of the other horses in the other races. I can play one where I have Mindframe and Grand Sonata and use all of the others in the others. Lots of different ways you can approach this, but just try to come up with a plan before you go in. Last week, plan was trying to beat Muhima. Had the right idea, but just not necessarily the wrong horses in there. This week, completely opposite, right? We're going to key in on the very short price chalky horse, but I've got a plan. And I think you always want to go into one of these sequences with some sort of a plan.
100%. And it's just encouraging people to think more about playing multiple tickets, because if you played every horse that we just showed on each of our screens as a caveman ticket, one ticket, I mean, the price would quickly balloon. But when you try to really focus on getting your key horses into as many of those multiple tickets as possible, it really reduces the price, and you're putting more money through the horses that you have stronger opinions about. So it just sets you up well to hit when your opinions are correct.
David, it was great to get a chance to meet you. I made the trip out to New York this week for a few days in the DRF offices. Big thank you to producers Lucia and Bobby for all the help getting me set up here with all the equipment. And I've had a lot of fun doing these videos with you so far. The last couple of weeks, we got really good responses. I was expecting at least a few negative responses out there. All of you were so very kind to us in YouTube land. So thanks again, and continue to give us your feedback. Let us know, do you agree with us? If you have any questions about handicapping information, David and I are going to try to answer some of your questions before a little bit more often. I know David was doing that last week too. So as we say goodbye, any final thoughts here, David?
No, happy to do more of this type of content in the future. Love to take more of the wagering focused approach for some of our hardcore horse playing fans of this DRF YouTube channel. So we would love to hear from you.
Make sure to subscribe to the channel below, drop any comments that you have, and we'll be back next week with another one of these videos. I think it might be David and Mike taking a swing at a pick 5 strategy. So best of luck to everyone this weekend, whether you're playing at Gulfstream, big day at Aqueduct, big day at Santa Anita, wherever you're playing, whoever you play, we wish you the best of luck.